So far we've only made minor changes to the checkout process. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can add an entire custom step to the checkout process. So let's get started. Customizing the Magento one-page checkout is no simple feat. It's actually one of the more advanced customizations you can perform on the Magento front end. Looking at the one-page checkout screen, you see you have a series of steps in an accordion layout, which you progress through until finally placing the order. So I'm going to show you in the code how these steps are generated and then proceed by showing you how we can add our own step to the beginning of this process. In Magento, there's a module specifically for the checkout process in app code core mage checkout. The block that's being loaded on this page is the one-page checkout block. And we can find that file in the block folder, and it will be called onepage.php. So right off the bat, you can see that there's a function called getSteps. And what this is going to do is provide an array of step information. So what this is going to look like is an array for each of these accordion elements: billing, shipping method, payment info, and the review step. So there's a few functions one layer up in the class inheritance, and that's the getSteps code function. So if we look at the abstract block for one-page checkout, we'll see that these steps are hard-coded. So this is one of the challenges in overriding the Magento one-page checkout, is that the steps are hard-coded in the core. And one of the ways around this is to use Magento's rewrite functionality. I consider that to be almost as bad as a core hack. So I'm going to show you another way to customize the one-page checkout with a simple layout override. So the basic thing that we want to do is to be able to have our getSteps function return something different. And the way we're going to do that is to change where the getSteps function is being used. And where that's being used is in the one-page template. So in front-end base default template checkout onepage.html, this is the template that's being loaded by that one-page block. And this is where it's using the getSteps function. So if instead of looping through these steps we can loop through our own, then we'll be able to add steps to the checkout process. So let me show you how we did that in our Mastering Magento example module. So in our module, first make sure that you have a front-end layout being loaded. Then in your front-end layout, see I have this section of code commented out right now. So this is the code that I need to add in order to change how the one-page checkout functions and add a step to the beginning of the process. Essentially, I'm taking the existing one-page checkout block and I'm changing its template by using the setTemplate action. And I'm going to use a template of my own found in example checkout onepage.html. So let me open side by side the core one-page checkout. So you can see both files are very similar. In the one-page checkout of my own making, however, in my for each loop, I'm using a helper method, example checkout, to get the checkout steps. And then again at the bottom, I'm using a helper method to get the active step. So the only real difference is in my for each loop and then at the bottom where I'm setting up the accordion JavaScript to get the proper active step. So what I've done is create a new helper called example checkout. And in my example checkout helper, I'll show you where this is. This is just in my example module in the helper folder. So I've created my own get checkout steps function. And what this is going to do is override one-step checkout data by retrieving the steps from that block that's already loaded into the layout. So this block gets loaded in the checkout XML layout. So on the one-page checkout, the checkout.onepage block here is being created. So we're using an already created block because I don't want to have to duplicate all of this work here. The checkout module is adding all these steps and adding these different blocks to the layout. I want to keep that. All I want to do is change the template so I can inject my own steps. So that's why I'm using the existing checkout block, so I can get the existing steps that Magento has already made. Then it's only a matter of injecting my own step information into the array. If it weren't for Magento conditionally having a login step, this would be much more simple, but since I want this to occur before billing, I have to kind of loop through and clone the array. My getActiveStep function is overriding the core checkout block, and this is basically returning either the event registration step or the login step. The next change to the layout is adding a custom block to the checkout page. So this custom block is going to contain my event registration form. So it consists of a template, which you can see is looping over all of the events that were purchased and all of the tickets for those events. So if I have one ticket where I have bought 2 of that ticket, it should print out 2 forms. So I have to loop through the events, the tickets, and then for each quantity of ticket, print out a form. And to make the template a little bit cleaner, this goes hand in hand with a registration block. Here, this is where I wrote the getEvents function to basically use the checkout session, get a quote, and loop through the items to find all the events. So with those 2 changes to the layout, overriding the checkout block and then adding in my own custom block for the form, I'm able to add a new step to the checkout. So now when I move to the front end and reload my checkout page, you'll see my event registration step in the very beginning. So let's recap. Overriding the Magento checkout process involves a handful of steps, but we can boil it down to 3 basic steps. First, we overrode the checkout one-page index layout to use our custom template for the checkout.onepage block. Doing this allows us to inject our custom steps into the checkout, which we did by using an additional helper method just to keep things clean in our template. Last but not least, we used our own custom block to render our event registration form, and that block was called Example Checkout One-Page Event Registration. Coming up next, I'll be showing you how to process orders in Magento, so stay tuned.